Cool, my GPU coming in with 50 US dollars, says catching the tail end will not really need food. Have a good one. Get some food, dude. Oh boy. So we talked about America's silent default. And you know, boys, the more, it's very depressing running news like this. I'm not going to lie, because when I see this stuff, it's just like, sometimes I will feel like a little bit of a defeatist. As much as on the channel, I try to make sure that we fight for the things we believe in, the principles and fundamentals we have, especially surrounding cryptocurrency and personal finance. But then you see what the big players are doing, and it's like, well, I really don't have any control over that. What we do have control over, of course, is, purchasing of cryptocurrency, and the ones that actually adhere to fundamentals, etc. But Saudi Arabia considers accepting the yuan instead of dollars for Chinese oil sales. We already talked about the silent default. Basically, the premise of that was that because sanctions are allowed to go, or because U.S. is basically using sanctions to block Russia, the trust in the American dollar as an investment from other countries is a lot less. Part of the trust that is basically given to the US dollar is specifically its ability to be the only thing you can trade for oil from Saudi Arabia, which is 80% of the world's oil supply. Ta-da! Enter in this situation, and we have huge warning signs, red flags for the US dollar. It only gets worse. Saudi Arabia is in active talks with Beijing to price some of its oil sales to China in yuan. People familiar with the matter said a move that would dent the US dollar's dominance of the global petroleum market and mark another shift by the world's top crude exporter towards Asia. The talks with China over the yuan-priced oil contracts have been off and on for 6 years, but have accelerated this year as the Saudis have grown increasingly unhappy with the decades-old U.S. security commitments to defend the kingdom, the people said. The Saudis are angry over U.S.'s lack of support for their intervention in the Yemen civil war, and over the Biden administration's attempt to strike a deal with Iran over its nuclear program. I want to make something very clear. This is coming from the Wall Street Journal, first of all. Okay. This is specifically the Saudis saying what they're upset with, and it's clearly the Biden administration. And I'm not going to sit here and say that you should vote for Trump because I wore an F Trump shirt, and I don't agree with that either. But what I'm saying is that you should not accept the underperformance of a U.S. president based on your own political viewpoints when it comes to stuff like this. This is a blanket not good thing to be happening and needs to be talked about. And it doesn't matter if you offend crazy Biden supporters over it, because if we don't talk about it, it just keeps going down the wrong path. Saudi officials have said they were shocked by the precipitous U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan last year. China buys more than 25% of the oil that Saudi Arabia exports. If priced in yuan, those sales would boost the standing of China's currency. The Saudis are also considering including the yuan-denominated futures contract, known as Petro Yuan, in the pricing model of the Saudi Arabian oil company known as Aramco. It would be a profound shift for Saudi Arabia to price even some of its roughly 6.2 million barrels a day of crude exports in anything other than dollars. The majority of global oil sales, around 80%, yes, I got the number right, are done in dollars. And the Saudis have traded oil exclusively in dollars since 1974. In a deal with the Nixon administration that included security guarantees for the kingdom. China introduced yuan-priced oil contracts in 2018 as part of its efforts to make its currency tradable across the world. But they haven't made a dent in the dollar's dominance of the oil market. For China, using dollars has become a hazard highlighted by U.S. sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program and on Russia in response to the Ukraine invasion. We talked about this last week. Please watch the clip. It was posted last night on America's Silent Default. So and then come back to this and watch this again too. So you're all up to date and you understand how these two tie in and what it means for the US dollar, because this is not good. In recent years, China has helped Saudi Arabia build its own ballistic missiles, consulted on nuclear program, and begun investing in Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's pet projects such as Neom, a futuristic new city. Saudi Arabia has invited Chinese President Xi Jinping to visit later this year. Meanwhile, the Saudi relationship with the U.S. has deteriorated under President Biden, who said in 2020 campaign that the kingdom should be a pariah for the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. Prince Mohammed, who U.S. intelligence authorities may say ordered Mr. Khashoggi's killing, refused to sit in on a call between Mr. Biden and the Saudi ruler King Salman last month. I want to say Salomon for whatever reason. It also comes as the U.S. economic relationship with the Saudis is diminishing. The U.S. is now among the top oil producers in the world. It once imported 2 million barrels of Saudi crude a day in the early 1990s, but those numbers have fallen to less than 500,000 barrels a day in December of 2021, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. I believe that's because we filled the reserves. So I think there's more to that story. Maybe you guys can confirm in chat, but I believe that's because when Trump came in, we filled the reserves. So that needs to be very clear, because this isn't quite intellectually honest in that statement, unless they go into it here in just a second. But just to be clear, I think it has something to do with that. By contrast, China's oil imports have swelled over the last 3 decades in line with its expanding economy. Saudi Arabia was China's top crude supplier in 2021, selling at 1.76 million barrels a day, followed by Russia at 1.6 million barrels a day, according to data from China's General Administration of Customs. Quote, the dynamics have changed dramatically. The U.S. relationship with the Saudis has changed. China is the world's biggest crude importer, and they are offering many lucrative incentives to the kingdom, end quote, said a Saudi official familiar with the talks. Quote, China has been offering everything you could possibly imagine to the kingdom, end quote, the official said. Yeah, I mean, bombs, ballistic missiles, actual help in military for protection, right? A senior U.S. official called the idea of the Saudis selling oil to China in Yuan, quote, highly volatile and aggressive, end quote, and quote, not very likely, end quote. The official said the Saudis had floated the idea in the past when there was tension between Washington and Riyadh. It is possible the Saudis could back off. Switching millions of barrels of oil trades from dollars to yuan every day could rattle the Saudi economy, which has a currency, the rial, pegged to the dollar. Real? I don't know how. You can help me out and I'll learn it eventually after I read comments. Prince Mohammed's aides have been warning him of unpredictable economic damage if he moves ahead with the plan hastily. Doing more sales in yuan would more closely connect Saudi Arabia to China's currency, which hasn't caught on with the international investors because of the tight controls of Beijing keeps on it. Yeah, and that's a point too. It's hard to actually invest in the yuan. A lot of people invest in currency, but that's my understanding as well. So contracting oil sales in a less stable currency could also undermine the Saudi government's fiscal outlook. Some officials have cautioned Prince Mohammed that accepting payments for oil in yuan would pose risks to Saudi's revenues tied in U.S. Treasury bonds abroad and the limited availability of the yuan outside of China. The impact on the Saudi economy would likely depend on the quantity of oil sales involved and the price of oil. Some economists said moving away from dollar-denominated oil sales would diversify the kingdom's revenue base and could eventually lead to it to repeg the rial to a basket of currencies similar to Kuwait's dinar. Quote, if it is done now at a time of strong oil prices, it would not be seen negatively. It would be more seen as deepening ties with China, end quote, said Monica Malik, chief economist at Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank. The Saudis still plan to do most oil transactions in dollars, the people familiar with their talk say. But the move could tempt other producers to price their Chinese exports in yuan as well. China's other big sources of oil are Russia, Angola, and Iraq. The Saudi move could chip away at the supremacy of the US dollar in the international financial system, which Washington has relied on for decades to print treasury bills it uses to finance its budget deficit. And we talked about this with the default, right? The function of it, right? What's done here is the validity of the US dollar is provided by its backing of oil, or basically used for the purchase of oil, meaning that every country has to buy the US dollar to purchase the oil. It's a scheme. Look, it's like SafeMoon, boys. That's all it is. The US dollar is like SafeMoon. It's a scheme. But let's get into it even more. So now what ends up happening is America creates a whole bunch of debt, and then they sell that debt to another country. And that country has faith in that debt primarily because they can utilize that debt to then later hopefully purchase oil, right? Or it has that value to it. And in addition to that, it typically was something that you couldn't block any other country from. So the reduction in the faith in the US dollar is multi-pronged at this point. With these sanctions going in, and it's clear that if you do not do what the US government wants you to do, we will shut off your access to the US dollar with Russia. And then follow that up with the fact that it doesn't even matter how much of the yuan would be available to purchase oil. That takes away from the power of the US dollar. So now that there's no faith in buying the US's debt, the US defaults. That's what's happening here. And it's scary. I don't think I need to read the rest of the article. So, as a cryptocurrency enthusiast, what should you do when you see things like this that are scary, especially if you are in the society that would be affected mostly, right? The US dollar. What should you do with your US dollars? You know, that's the question. Us in cryptocurrency, not financial advice, but me, like, as what I would do is protect the liquid currencies, the currencies I'm going to use to purchase stuff with something like cryptocurrency, probably Bitcoin, or physical assets. 1 second. All right. So what do I mean by the physical assets? Well, why do we mine, right? Why do I mine? Because now I have physical assets that generate revenue in a currency that is protected from the inflation of the US dollar. It's a multi-pronged attack, okay? And you need to self-custody it. You need to do all of those things, right? And that's where we're at. That's what Bitcoin was created for. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Morning Show every Monday through Friday, 7:45 a.m. Pacific and 10:45 a.m. Eastern Time. You can check out more clips here, or if you're interested in checking out the entire live show, you can check that out down here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday.